Welcome to Command Shift Left, the podcast that helps you navigate the treacherous waters of the software development, ops, and security world while also diving into the hot current trends in the industry. Join myself, developer Philip, our co-host or Vice.
Hey audience!
As we battle through hilarious real-world stories, pro tips and hacks for navigating your way around developer security, learning about our Shift Left life, and life stories that have saved our ass. We have an amazing pleasure of welcoming two guests with us today. We have Tomasz and Bartosz. And in no particular order, let's start off with short introductions. And maybe Tomasz, you can kick us off.
Thank you. So, hi everyone. My name is Tomasz. I'm working as a product manager or CPO at Uptime Robot. And Uptime Robot is the world's leading uptime monitoring service. So basically what we do is we make sure that all the servers, all the websites, and all the things that we're using are running smoothly. And yeah, we've been doing that for almost 15 years now. And yeah, basically that's it about me.
Amazing. We're happy to have you here. And Bartosz?
Hi, thanks for the introduction. My name is Bartosz, and I've been doing an activity merging the security and web development for a couple of years already in the Devs Academy, when we teach developers how to write secure code. I've been doing software for over a decade with many different companies and projects, and I'm happy to have you guys challenging different ideas together on this podcast.
That's awesome. Bartosz and I know each other through the Sneak Ambassador program. So Bartosz is also a Sneak Ambassador, and I've seen him do some great educational things around security. So if you want to learn more, check his background and website.
Amazing. And I think at this moment, it's, first of all, it's a pleasure to have both of you. And second of all, I think it's the right and perfect time to kick off with our first fact. And that fact is where you are. So why don't you take it away?
For sure. So my fact for this episode is that the weakest link principle is getting worse. So first of all, to explain what the weakest link principle means, it's a concept in security that basically says your security, your chain of security is only as good as its weakest link. So it's enough to have one link that is faulty in your chain and everything breaks apart dramatically. So this is a concept that has been known for ages and has been at the forefront of security discussions. But something that is becoming apparent, at least to me when I'm looking at the news, is that the basically butterfly effect or little nail effect that the weakest link principle has is getting worse. And an example that I've recently seen is the attack on United Healthcare through Change Healthcare that has been estimated to have the damage of $2.3 billion was a result of just one single credential for one single Citrix portal that didn't have multi-factor authentication. So, those credentials leaking basically cascaded to damage, as I said, over $2 billion. And we've heard of a lot of cases where small gaps like these led to breaches and successful attacks. But I think it's becoming apparent that the size of the damage and the impact that these small little minute aspects can have is becoming dramatic. And you can see how, ironically, the chain here comes into effect. So one user, no MFA, on a single portal as part of a company, Change Healthcare, that has been acquired by a larger company. And so from that user to that acquired company to the parent company, that damage propagates dramatically. And I wonder, how big is this going to get? Are we going to see nation states fall to their knees because someone forgot to configure their firewall? Are we going to see entire markets or entire regimes change because someone had their password selected as something that is not strong enough? Or who knows what else? And I wonder what you folks think, and also what do you think we should do about this?
Yes, it seems to me that now thinking about it, if a company is going for an acquisition, surely they would have some principles in place to make sure that threats like that don't exist, especially that it can have such a big impact. I mean, is this mostly because it was just so hard to find that nobody really focused on it, or was it because that there were just no security measures in place when something like that happens? How does it usually work? It makes sense for something to be in place, but like, what is it?
So I'm sure that the thorough process of reviewing that company and making it go through a security audit and maybe even third-party auditing, and probably doing security questionnaires and probably vetting the security personnel there. But in the end of the day, what we're talking about here is a needle in a haystack. It's a tiny little thing that is easy to miss. The problem here, the way to address these kind of things, at least from my experience, is to have blanket defense mechanisms. And here specifically, if you're defining multi-factor authentication, if you're relying on it, you shouldn't have that be on a pair interface or a pair account basis. It has to apply for everything, because otherwise your assumptions on where you have multi-factor authentication will just turn out to be false. So you are able to apply it for everything and make sure that that's the case, enforcing it through your identity management, or you're likely to just have that fail for you. But still, it's a really big problem to have. The size of attack surfaces are increasing the more things you have, and the needles are staying the same size. So the haystacks are getting bigger, the needles are not getting bigger.
So I would add two perspectives on this from my side. First of all, what we see is what we see. We don't see what we don't see. And I wonder how many of those needles are getting unexploited and actually lost in the vacuum when such a big things happen. Because if you imagine that this is not an isolated example, but this is only the one that we managed to observe. And if we see those acquisitions happening probably on daily basis in different parts of the world, those needles just, are left unattended. And this is an interesting perspective as well to have in mind, that even though you might have had a very thorough process of trying to identify, a lot of them are not being observed by both sides, the defenders and those who are trying to exploit them. So this is one perspective. And the second, I think that having a process of kind of like a checklist, what has to be addressed when this happens is very vital, because even though you might have a very, very dedicated team and very skilled people, I really am not sure if anybody having something out of head will ever work, and having some kind of like a check boxes to cross every time something like that has to be addressed is very vital. And there is a reason why when the planes take off, there is a procedure to follow and everything has to be double checked, cross checked. And even though those people do this on daily basis for maybe already hundreds of times, they do have to go through the procedure to make this routine not, get you lost. So these are my two cents of this topic.
I like that metaphor of having a very strict list, have very strict rules, like military grade rules that everyone adheres to. And I think that it's applicable for a lot of things, but there's also a challenge there. One, most people working in organizations are not soldiers and are not accustomed to following rules that strictly. And two, even planes crash, right? So even a good pilot going for a checklist might make a mistake. And the problem here is not that planes crash, that to some degree that's unavoidable. The problem here is because of the weakest link principle, when a plane crashes, it takes the entire air carrier with it, which is not usually the case when a fighter plane crashes. So there's this asymmetry, a potentially growing asymmetry. That's essentially my fact here. The asymmetry between the size of the vulnerability and the size of the impact is, very asymmetric and continuing to grow asymmetric. So even with checklists that are military grade, I'm not sure if we'll be okay. I think we need better tools. I think it's either more blanket automated solutions that cover like that are binary. It's either everything or nothing, or better automation to kind of have stopgap on the things that we miss.
So I was just thinking, like, yeah, you said you can double check everything, you can have the rules and protocols and everything you want to, but still, if something like CrowdStrike could happen these days, I mean, what can you really do to be really safe? I mean, I don't think that it's in our power to like make sure that everything will be still working no matter what. You can have 2FAs everywhere, you can do whatever you want, but then even Microsoft can do something stupid and everything will fall down.
There is one solution. Always have two-factor authentication. Always 2FA. And this is the only solution to all of the security problems. And 99% of the issues are going to be mitigated.
There's no. I think it's a good idea. Well, I don't think anything is a silver bullet. But maybe let's shift the conversation from how to avoid this. Maybe this is to some degree unavoidable, but how do we handle the fact that the damage is increasing? Like, so we saw CrowdStrike like taking half the internet down. We saw this creating $2 billion in damage. By the way, 22 million out of it is the ransom that they took with ransomware. The rest is just the cascading effects of the breach. So what can we do to, like, once something like this happens, how do we contain the damage and how do we avoid these type of events? Like maybe next time it's not taking off the half of the internet for a couple of days. It's like taking all of humanity out of existence because something terrible has happened.
I think it's going to be pretty tough to avoid realistically. I mean, our security measures might grow, but people who intervene with the systems, they're getting better with the use of their technology, with the use of AI. So they're just going to find better ways to find these vulnerabilities. So it's really realistically about how do we stop them from finding better ways to find the vulnerabilities is kind of what I think we should be trying to battle here.
That's an arms race that's also constantly accelerating. But I'm actually asking, what about after it happened? Let's say we can't stop the breach. The breach is going to happen. And let's say you're an engineer in a company and you're seeing that something has changed in production or something has changed in the environment you're managing and everything is down. How do you stop it from propagating? How do we train ourselves to react quickly enough to minimize the damage?
As you said, you have to react quickly, and that's the key part from my perspective. I mean, that's actually what we are doing, basically. So you have to be aware if something is happening, and that's sometimes the toughest job because everything might seem to be running smoothly, everything might seem to be going just as it should, but in the background, there might be something down and you are not even aware. So from my perspective, you have to monitor everything and you have to get those alerts about every single slightest change that is not expected, and after that you can respond. So really to know that something is happening, that's the most crucial part, and then it really depends on what's the nature of the problem that's happening. I mean, if it's something that's not that critical, somebody just messed up something in code and can be just quickly rewarded, then you're fine. But if it's something that's going to grow bigger, then you have a serious problem.
I think that the most important thing is actually starting with the question that you actually asked. How do we prepare for that? So, because if you don't think about it and if you don't challenge this at the beginning of this, then there is no possible way to address that. So I would say that the very fact that you are asking this question and trying to prepare is a great foundation. And secondly, if you ask those questions, maybe a little bit of threat modeling and coming up with some incident response prevention plan, something like that. That, okay, we know that there's a huge asymmetry in this phenomenon that you just brought up, that there is a single link, a single piece of a huge network, a huge mesh, that if it actually fails, the entire system collapses. So maybe trying to identify those things at the very beginning and knowing those weak points and assuming that it will happen, it will eventually happen, and having this response plan so that not everyone is running in a hurry that, oh, there's a fire, but there is a strategic plan to, okay, I don't know if anybody could have ever think about things like a CrowdStrike issue, but modeling similar incidents right now from now into the future maybe might a little bit save our assets. But as Philip said, we will not prevent everything. Those things will happen. Plane crashes, but there is a reason why planes are the most secure means of transport in the world.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And I think we've covered some critical points here. So we covered preventive measures. We've covered monitoring things and assuming things would go wrong and being able to detect them when they happen. And we covered having incident response ready for when things happen and assuming things would go wrong. And with all of these in place, I can congratulate everyone. You're SOC 2 Type 2 certified. Audience, you can now go and sell yourselves as SaaS products to other companies.
And the cherry on top here is to just make all engineers soldiers.
I'm not sure about that one, but we'll see. But on that positive and interesting note, I think we can move on to our next fact, and that fact belongs to Bartosz.
Okay, so my fact would be that having been in this world, a breach between developers and security for a couple of years already now, I have observed a interesting phenomenon that even though the shift left is actually taking over for quite a long time, and there are companies really getting onto this, let's say, not even a hype anymore, but a must that, okay, we are going to shift left and our engineers are going to take more and more security on their shoulders. But still, I have heard voices from the different individuals and companies that are saying, okay, but this is not the job of engineers. Engineers are supposed to build features, do the business, and so on. And we have a dedicated team of security professionals who I by design said it twice, because this is what the line of those people is, that those are people who are supposed to deal with all those things security, and engineers are supposed to build features, make the business happy, and leave the nitty-gritty of security to those other individuals. But there is a middle ground as well with security champions that some companies are also trying to, let's say, understand this dichotomy that, okay, these are two different kinds of professionals. Those are to build things, these are those to secure things. But let's try to make a bridge and try to find individuals who are going to be so-called security champions, that are going to be a transfer people between those two worlds, acknowledging the fact that these are two distinct groups. And this is very interesting to take on, because Shift Left would say something a little bit more extreme, saying that those two groups should actually somehow merge into one. So this is my fact for today.
Awesome. I think, first of all, it's a very interesting and important fact. It talks about like the evolution in the space. Like, we've come a long way, but it's not like we've unified around a kumbaya single understanding of cybersecurity. I think we also kind of saw that in our previous fact discussion. I think there are like two key points here in like the naysayers here. They're saying, one, engineers should be building features, not security. That's kind of understandable. Like, you wanna have the most velocity. You want to have your engineers build the most. And then there's the other part, which says engineers are not good in doing security. They're not professional enough in doing that. And I want to address these two separately. And I'll start with the second one because it annoys me. It even enrages me, I'd say. My take on security in general and cybersecurity specifically is that if you're not an engineer, your possibility or likelihood of actually understanding security is very negligible. Because, and again, this connects to our first fact, it's about needles and haystacks. It's about small weakest links, unless you understand the system as a whole, and you understand all the little parts of it, how they connect to one another, how networking works, how a operating system works, how processes run, how memory is managed, how memory is stored in databases. Unless you understand all these things, you don't have a chance in hell in understanding vulnerabilities and actually building strategy against them. You need at least a surface level understanding, and the deeper you're able to go, you're more likely to actually be able to list and mount a good plan and strategy to face vulnerabilities. So to sum that up, I think when we're talking about who's best suited to be a security professional, I'd say an engineer more than anyone else. And if you want the best security, get an engineer that has security understanding or has the ability to grow into security to lead that for you, or become an engineer yourself. Those, I think, are the best ways to address security. Regarding the second part, yeah, that is a conflict. Like, I want my engineers to produce as much software and quality as possible, but I also want them to be security aware, and we want security as a whole. And I'd say it's in the end of the day a balancing act, and it's probably more about the processes that you build and the systems that you allow your engineers to work within, aka how your CI/CD works, how you do testing, how things are passed between different stakeholders and between different engineers, and between engineering and ops and security. It's about these processes more than the efforts of any specific engineer. So if you invest in security-oriented software development, it will probably cost you less, and you'll be able to implement more security than probably any other way around. And that, in the end of the day, kind of leads to shifting left, at least to some degree. But it doesn't mean that everyone needs to shift all the way to the left. It's your organization that shifts left, not every specific developer.
It's nice take. When you're saying that, something that just popped into my mind. Actually, a couple of things popped into my mind. First of all, when you said at the very beginning that the hay's getting bigger, haystack, right? So we have those needles, we are very small, but the haystacks are getting bigger and bigger. And when we talk about engineers getting, the security-oriented posture, it's a challenging thing to balance that. But think of it this way, that everything is getting more and more complex. And 10 years ago, in order to be like somehow able to grasp the full picture, the job was easier. Now, these days, in order to see the entire, as you say, the haystack is getting bigger, it's really more challenging to be able to perceive the system as a whole and being able to contribute on the detail level. Because, write code, and then you have to, maybe you are working on a small feature, some part of the system, but still we are saying you have to be able to see the bigger picture. Yeah, but year after year, it's getting harder and harder to be able to have this perspective, because things got really way more complex. And having AI right now lifting up with adding the complexity of the systems we build is going to be even more hard. And I have even heard the term that we were supposed to be T-shaped, that, you have the main expertise that you are, really, really deep, and then you have those left and right understanding. Right now, some say that we are about to be M-shaped. So we have to be the specialist in every single vertical. And then if you don't know anything, some topic, you just go ChatGPT stuff. And then now you are supposed to going to be deep in the vertical, which you are not familiar with, right? So instead of T-shaped, no, you should be M-shaped. Now you have to excel in everything, right? If you don't know things, you don't Google. You just use LLM to help you get up to speed very, very fast. And actually, it works, because I will tell you what I was doing yesterday, for example. I was trying to build a serverless application with one of the providers, and it's really crazy that most of the code was produced by LLM, and I was trying to just tell what I'm supposed to achieve, and most of the code was getting written. And Anthropic in Cloud is really good at that. And I thought that this particular system, it was actually Cloudflare, that, serverless and all the APIs might have changed from, month to month or even week to week. And it was so good and delivering actually working code from a one-shot, one-shot prompt. So normally I would have to dig into the documentation, learn the serverless APIs that this provider actually, has in their assets. Here, I just was typing what I wanted to achieve. I, of course, need to understand what I'm trying to achieve. I know that it is a serverless approach. I know the ins and outs in this approach, but the functionality and all the low-level things were generated out of my prompts. And of course, I had to glue things together. We are not yet at the position that these applications are going to be, built out of the pure prompts. You have to still glue things. But what I'm trying to take is this conversation and this point is to that this M-shaped thinking and the pressure for us as engineers to see the picture as a whole and still be able to go deep in every single hole. And one of them may be security or cross-cutting concerns or like that. Is getting harder, and we have to work really our ass off to see this whole picture. If we really want to be those engineers that see the big picture and are able to jump on the parts of the system and do the low-level hard work, because these days low-level, back in the day when I was starting my career, low-level was considered assembler or machine code. Now, when you prompt stuff, it seems like low level is a regular code because we are moving up and up the ladder of abstraction. And now, when I think about it, when I say low level code, I think, so it's not going to be a prompt. It's going to be real Java or real JavaScript. And it's the perspective really changes. It is just a realization that I just had when I say low-level code. The real code, the JavaScript, this is the low level because normally I would write prompt to write this code. So this is changing very fast, and AI doesn't help it at all.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think something to kind of highlight here, I think when we talk about security expertise, some of it is like knowing fundamentals, like I think networking. I think that's always going to be needed to some degree. Maybe networking would change, but the concept of networking and how it works will probably stay on. But the other parts are not knowing specifics, but having the right mindset to think about security. It's essentially having somewhat of a criminal mind, the ability to understand how things come together and how you can take them apart and and abuse them and use them to your whims and wills. So yes, I don't think any engineer or anyone should be required to know every bit and byte in the system, but they should have the capacity of reviewing every bit and byte in their mind and be able to weigh the risks around them. And the rest of it, would be using tools, would be let's use the right LLM model or anything else that comes down the road that will enable us to inspect, manage, and operate everything. And at the end of the day, I think it's more about mindset and be around the processes that we build so that we can so the people with the understanding of what security is can bring everyone else aboard to work within that checklist or guidelines that would keep everything secure. But it's definitely going to be a challenge. I did really like your epiphany here about what low level is and how, it makes me wonder what low level would be in like 5 years from now. It's kind of scary to think.
It's going to be everything that we consider, so to speak, high level.
Yeah, and we've been through this in the past, right? So even like with computers, like in the past, like developers would use to like punch cards. Like you'd type in the code, the end code would be like literal holes on paper, and then you had like keyboards, and like, oh, you're not really working with the code, you're working with an interface that would write the code for you. And we're constantly adding more abstraction layers, and it's scary to think where we'll be like, maybe it will be like actual brains that are the code itself, and they're like living creatures that are the manifestations of AI or something else from like a horror movie. Who knows? And on this scary note, I think it's a perfect point to move to our third fact, and that fact belongs to Philip.
All right. I already like how this recording of the podcast is going, because we are very much security focused, and I think this is all just an accident, but I do like it. But my fact for this episode is that there is an attack called a man in the browser, which exploits browser extensions to steal data. Now, a lot of you might know of another similarly named a cybersecurity threat. It's called man in the middle, and it's also an attack. But it's much less known. But again, the man in the browser is much less known, but equally dangerous. Now, this attack in particular, it's a malicious software that gets injected into a computer, or specifically and more accurately here, into your actual browser, and it exploits the vulnerabilities of your browser extensions or plugins. So whenever you're now thinking of installing any new extension, you should consider maybe doing something that actually at least has some security behind it and not nothing random out of the internet. Now, this man in the browser cybersecurity threat, essentially once it's in your browser, the attack can intercept and modify any data that is sent between the browser and the internet without you knowing that anything is happening. Now, this is where it becomes quite scary, because this attack can alter your web experience in real time. It can manipulate any of the transactions that you're making. For example, if you're paying for something, it can steal all your login credentials. And you might be thinking, oh, yes, but what if I'm using a website that is, has a HTTPS and secured with a certificate and so on? Well, that actually, it bypasses that. It can be a HTTPS website and it will just work in that same way. Now, since this manipulation actually happens in the browser itself, the attack is very, very hard to detect using any traditional, security methods like certificates and so on, or even two-factor authentication. So this actually makes it one of the more kind of subtle but dangerous threats in the cyber world today. And it really kind of highlights here the importance of, how vigilant and how aware you have to be about, security extensions and kind of what you install on a computer and so forth and so forth. And this kind of, I'd want to link this back into the previous thing that Bartosz actually said, which is the comparison between the T and the M letter. The T, you being an expert in something and spanning in other directions, and the M letter, you having to kind of dig and learn new things. For God's sake, please don't use ChatGPT or any LLM to write yourself some security features and generate the code for it. You have to, like Or said, be aware of the features you're writing, have some basic knowledge of how to handle security, and then maybe use these LLMs for giving you hints on maybe what you should think about, but never to actually write the code to solve these security threats. Anyhow, I'm curious to think what you guys think of the man in the browser attack.
Yeah, I think it's something that we've been living with for quite a while, actually. Even in the late 2000s, where you have like all the toolbars. So these were essentially the same concept. So they didn't necessarily steal your personal information or your sensitive information, but they hijacked your session, your search, for example, to direct you to their ads and direct you to their traffic, and that way they basically derive value or stole value from you. And this was very common. Like every other grandmother out there had to ask her grandson to clear all these various toolbars that have filled out their browsers. And I think browsers at that time were like the Wild West. Like everyone could install anything, anywhere. And we're starting to see the browser manufacturers becoming more strict around how browsers and their adjacent software are being managed. And we're seeing secure browsers. So you have companies like Talon and Island and etc. that produce enterprise grade tailored browsers that have security kind of built into them to protect from these type of attacks. But I think like the rest of potential security vulnerabilities, this one is also here with us to stay. Even with the protections in place, and even with you being aware of these, some will be able to sneak in, and this will be an attack vector that would stick on. And as browsers are becoming our main way to do work. Like in the past, you do work like you'd have like desktop applications. Do you remember those? Remember running your actual machine?
I do.
Developers still do that from time to time, especially if you're running like a Docker container or something like that. But still, most applications today, SaaS applications specifically, are web-based and in the browser. So that's another case of the haystack growing bigger and having more impact. And I think that's the best I can say to that. So definitely a vulnerability to look out for. Don't have a silver bullet for you.
You said that you should be careful about what you are installing into your browser or installing in general into your machine. But still, I mean, as we are talking about the password leaks and the security and safe extensions, probably remember the LastPass issue. It was not that long time ago. It was really well-known extension for browsers to store your credentials, basically.
Yeah.
And it was hacked. So, I mean, you can try to be as safe as you want to be, but I mean, there's still risks that you are taking installing anything into your machine, even using anything on your computer. And you might be really trying to stay as safe as you want to, but there's still something that might happen, and it will happen. Anything that could go wrong will go wrong, right?
I didn't know that. That is like you're a company and you have one purpose, and you can't uphold it to protect passwords, and you get hacked. That is horrible.
It's a classic case of who watches the Watchmen, right?
Yeah.
I think it's from like originally from a poem or a poet from like Roman times. So this has always been a problem. What can you actually rely on? What you can actually trust? And maybe this is another factor of our modern times. Like as the haystack is getting more complex and bigger, you actually have less ability to rely and trust parts in it. Like for example, with AI, they give us a lot of complexity and a lot of power, but with their hallucinations and maybe also ulterior motives that are coded into them, it's harder to trust them as opposed to like more deterministic code or more easily understandable code or transparent code that we used to use. Scary times.
Very scary times.
I think though we can remain positive knowing that like this is like the era of time. Like it's always been this case. Complexity has always been on the rise. We're on the more clear part of the exponential curve. So like if you were in the Middle Ages, like you wouldn't really notice that things are moving along. And nowadays, very, very apparent. But it was always kind of moving along. I don't know if that's destiny or anything religious like that, but that's at least the trend that we've been observing. And so far, so good. So maybe we can just be happy and not worry about it.
So I'd like to pose one question, and this is kind of generic. But don't you guys think that anything that we build, even if it's super highly secured, there is still capability of it having some vulnerability and being hacked? So literally everything can be hacked.
Yeah,
technically.
By definition.
By definition.
Yeah, and it's easy to prove because in the end of the day, you're a human.
Yeah.
And you're fallible, like you make mistakes.
Yeah.
And you or another human has built the system and is using the system. And so even if you designed an AI and that AI has built the system for you, there will always be somewhere down the chain the human factor. So everything is born in sin, essentially. So no matter what you do, inherently there's room for mistakes to come in. And those mistakes are just another name for vulnerabilities. And yeah, so everything is vulnerable and nothing is truly secure. And sleep tight.
Yeah, and with the growing power of computation, the internet will become more dangerous than it is currently. Surely.
Well, not necessarily. Again, I think it's about the processes that we build around things. Like,
Right.
so, for example, you can say, like before early man discovered fire, like discovered the ability to start fire on demand. Like people would say, "Oh, fire is very dangerous. You probably don't want to touch that." And when people started having more fire around, they were like, "Oh, this is extremely dangerous. Fire will consume everything. We'll lose everything, and we shouldn't use fire." Obviously, that's a problematic approach that leaves you stuck cowering inside a cave. We were able to use fire. Yes, we had fire outbreaks, and it comes with a cost and pain. But overall, we were able to use fire in a intelligent way and contain it and use it for producing more value than just risk. So it's about how we create the guidelines to work with these new fire from the gods that we got. But we'll need to discover it as we go, as we understand what fire actually is, which also early humans didn't know. They just thought it's something shiny that makes your chickens taste better.
And I think on that scary note and on those scary summaries, I think it's the perfect moment to move on to our last and final fact. And that fact is by you, Tomasz. So why don't you give it away?
So just recently I've been reading about these biocomputers, and we've been talking a lot about security and how to protect everything. But right now the biocomputers, or brain in jar can learn to control robots. So what do you guys think about this, about the future of security and the whole AI and everything? You've got biocomputers basically doing all that stuff, and how we can stay safe from really being hacked by a humanoid or some kind.
Yeah, that's a very interesting space. So first of all, I think it's interesting to see like the new breakthroughs in this area. So having organic brains or brain cells be used as part of computing. So we talk all the time about embedding machines into our brains, like when we talk about Neuralink, and we don't talk as much about embedding brains into our machines. And the fact that people were able to take brain cells and embed them into devices and use them for computing, aka the brain cells actually compute things and have interesting and significant performance, I think by itself is mind-boggling, ironically mind-boggling. And I'm excited to see where it goes. And I wonder if like we're seeing these two trends like just moving towards one another. Like we're moving towards the machines, and the machines are moving towards us. And I guess it's the singularity. I guess at some point they just become one big mash, and we won't be able to tell the difference. Taking the security perspective of this, so while I'm not in favor of security by obscurity, it's a anti-pattern. So security by obscurity is that when like you try to make for example, your API very unclear, very confusing, and that way you say, oh, no one will be able to attack this system because no one will be able to use this system or understand how it works. While I'm not in favor of security by obscurity, I think there is something to be said about how much we don't understand the human brain, that there's so much obscurity here that will give you a level of protection for a little bit. Like if there's a key part in your system that is an actual human mind that is that is monitoring or guiding the security or providing security, it will probably be more challenging to find vulnerabilities in it. As we said, like all humans are vulnerable, so there will be vulnerabilities here as well. But maybe there's some added protection here, but for a limited period of time, maybe even a very limited period of time. But still maybe something that you can use if you like, if push comes to shove.
I think this human brain things is something that is completely out of my scope, because I really can't comprehend how this can potentially work, because I do have some interest in psychology, and just the very, very fact of the subconscious mind and the things that are completely out of the my systematic or engineering understanding of the world can't comprehend that. So if we are talking about some machines trying to connect to the mind and convey the information in between, it's so hardcore that I really can't have any stable sentence or stable belief on that, because it's so mystic and so weird that,
Bartosz, it's happening now. It's not mysticism. It's a device that you can buy.
And what is going to do to my mind, this device? Guys, you can enlighten me.
Let's take it in steps. So in the beginning, let's not talk about something that connects to your mind. Let's just talk about like your next Alexa that you order from Amazon. I'm skipping ahead like 5 years ahead. So now that Alexa comes in with a human brain cells are embedded as part of the device to give you the best performance and whatever. So how do you feel about buying devices that contain human brains?
Did you watch, guys, Black Mirror? Serious?
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you see what can go wrong with such a things when you connect those parts of the technology to your eyes or brain? I really don't want to be in that position. Maybe I'm not ready to connect to my brain to some physical device.
You'll need to run into the forest or something, because this is happening, and no one's going to stop this. No one can stop this at this point.
There are people who are still living in the forest and they are happy.
Your solution for cybersecurity: become a hermit.
Well, realistically, there's a movie coming out where AI is like implemented in the home. It's like a smart home, and it starts to like lecture and take care of the children of the family, and then it becomes the parents vis the AI. I don't know if you guys saw this. It might ring a bell for some of you, but that's scary, and that seems very probable.
How is it called?
I can't remember.
Yeah, I've seen the movie, but I don't remember the name.
Are you sure that this is going to take over our lives? Because there are hypes that are popping every now and then, and everybody is saying that this is going to change our lives. I don't know if you remember the hype around 3D TVs. Everybody, about 15 years ago, that 3D TV was something that, whoa, this is the new television, and everybody would be in the 3D, and it didn't take off. And I think the VRs were also, about 5 years ago, really hyped that the only way people will interact with the computers is going to be with virtual or mixed reality. I do own a virtual reality headset, and as for now, I don't really think it is going to change the entire way I interact with the computer. And on the same perspective, I may try to look at the human brain cells that you just said about shipping with some new devices. And am I really going to plug it into my brain? I don't know. But my point is that there are many of such phenomenons happening every now and then. And there is a lot of expectations, and people are saying this is going to change everything forever, but it never does. So I'm very skeptical when it comes to connecting human brains.
It never does. Do you have a mobile phone?
But not in the way that is very disruptive. Or maybe social media and smartphones are disruptive already with the addictive stuff.
About you. I don't go anywhere without taking my phone with me. It's like it's a second organ. And while to maybe address your points directly, I think with 3D screens and with augmented and virtual reality devices, those didn't take off, not because their value is not desired. It's because the technology failed to deliver on the promise. Like 3D screens are just crap. Like, you have to put these glasses, they're not very comfortable, and they deliver a poor experience. They create headaches. It just doesn't work well. Similarly, though better, but similar with virtual reality goggles and augmented reality goggles. Like, you had companies like Magic Leap that promised, like, they had this huge device that if you look through it, it gave you an actual experience of like seeing things as if they're in the same room with you. But they weren't able to shrink it from the size of a room to something that you can actually put on your face. And what they ended up delivering were just like mediocre VR goggles that are on par with what like Facebook has. And so that company kind of evaporated, even though they raised multiple hundreds of millions of things, or tens of millions. I don't remember anymore. But if someone, and I'm sure of that, if someone is able to deliver like real life 3D holograms into your vision, and you can see things as if they're in the same room with you in a good experience that like doesn't burn you, doesn't makes your eye or brain or whatever hurt, then yeah, I'd say that would take over the entire marketplace within a very short period of time.
I believe that those VR AR headsets are not mainstream yet. I still think that they will become like thing that you're using just like a mobile phone.
Those
just not yet. It will take a couple of years probably.
They're still evolving. Ironically, I think their best method of integrating with our experience is directly through our brains. So if instead of projecting it into your eyes, you'll have a chip in your brain that will make you see it as if it's there, like as an illusion, I think that will be give you the highest fidelity, like directly into your brain.
Yeah, with 30 seconds unskippable ads and stuff like that, right?
Depends if you do YouTube Brain Premium or not.
Wow, another monthly payment we'll have to make.
Yeah, so you'll have to choose that month. You have to choose: do I keep my memories that I'm storing in AWS in an AWS bucket, or do I remove ads from when I'm talking to my mother? Those would be the choices that you have in the future. And obviously, if you upgrade for the added security to have an additional brain latched onto your brain to just do security for you. Yeah, I'm looking forward for the future.
Will it also help me make the right decisions? The security part?
That's literally what security is about, making the right decisions. So yes. It's actually a good summary of what I meant with the right processes, making sure that the people around the chain make the right decisions.
Yeah.
I just also want to add, like, the fact that we had here wasn't necessarily about connecting devices to our brains. It's about taking brains and using them for compute. And I think it would be interesting to see what are the things where, like, regular CPUs don't deliver and GPUs don't deliver, and organic architecture does. I have like this assumption that, like, for running machine learning models, brains would be better. So like if you can compile your LLM to run on an actual brain, that will probably get better performance than on a GPU. If like the hardware, like the brain, is actually modeled for the brain, like our brains have with neural plasticity. And then, yeah, if you, as we want to embed machine learning agents into devices that we have, embedding organic brains into them would make sense as well.
Where do we get those brains from?
You grow them in the lab. You don't.
Sure, of course.
You don't actually, like, initially they don't belong to people. I think there's another ethical problem. Like, at one point, does a collection of brain cells count as a person? Like, how many brain cells is it? Is that a person? Like, is that do they have rights?
Did you guys read Brave New World?
I haven't.
No.
Is that like
Aldous Huxley? He describes the very futuristic vision of the world, and Brave New World is supposed to be very happy. There are no the thing that just is very similar to what you're saying is that people are raised in the bottles, in the labs. There is no concept of mother and father. Everybody belongs to everybody, and those people are, somehow developed in labs, in the bottles, and there's also a directed place in the society that you are going to join. You can be on the different levels of hierarchy, and it's very hard to change the position in your social hierarchy. But the very fact is that there are no families, there's no concept or having a baby. The people are raised in the labs, in the bottles, and I would say that, or you would have read this book, having seen your futuristic, let's say, perspective on life and technology. But you should definitely check Aldous Huxley and Brave New World.
Yeah. I'd be more like, when I'm seeing with our current cultural trends, I'd be more worried about not people saying that people don't have rights, but more like people concerned about like the rights that they want to give to, like, people go to you and say, "Oh, you're running this device. You're unethical. You're a monster. You need to liberate your device. It's my child now. I want to adopt it." I think that's more likely to happen with the current, let's call it, moral trends that we have. But I'm afraid, with all these ethics and moral dilemmas that we have to solve, and we obviously have all the answers for it, I'm afraid we don't have time for them in this episode, so they will have to wait for another. And this would be the perfect time for us to wrap up.
Tomasz, Bartosz, thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you for sharing your facts. And as always, to the audience, we will see you in the next episode.
See ya. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
I think this is the perfect time to wrap up the show. If you liked this podcast, tell your friends about it. If you didn't like it, tell your enemies about it.